The 8-page letter was hidden beneath insurance documents in James's safe, written in his careful handwriting on our anniversary letterhead from 3 years ago. I'd been avoiding the safe for 6 months since his sudden death, but the estate lawyer insisted I needed to locate all financial documents before we could finalize the probate process. What I found instead was a confession that shattered 40 years of marriage in the space of 8 devastating pages. My dearest Catherine, if you are reading this, then I am dead, and you are about to discover the truth I was too cowardly to tell you while I was alive. You deserve to know everything. But more importantly, 2 children in Morocco desperately need you now that they have lost both their parents. My hands trembled as I read those opening lines, sitting in James's study surrounded by the methodical filing system he'd maintained for our entire marriage. 2 children. Children that James had never mentioned in 40 years of sharing every detail of our lives together. In 1998, during a business trip to Morocco, I met Fatima Ben Ali. What began as a professional relationship became something I never intended. I fell in love with her. Catherine, I want you to understand that this was never about not loving you. I loved you then, and I love you now with every fiber of my being. But Fatima could give me something that fate had cruelly denied us: children. I set the letter down, needing to catch my breath as memories flooded back of our years struggling with infertility. The treatments, the hope, the devastating disappointments month after month. The specialists in Boston who finally told us that children were medically impossible. The adoption agencies that led nowhere. The gradual acceptance that we would be a childless couple, channeling our parental instincts into other pursuits. James had been my rock through all of it, holding me through countless nights of grief, assuring me that our love was enough, that we could build a meaningful life together without children. He'd seemed genuinely content with our quiet life, never expressing regret or resentment about our biological limitations. Apparently, he'd found another solution. Fatima and I have 2 children together, Yassine, now 16, and Amina, 14. For the past 15 years, I have maintained a second life, traveling to Morocco twice yearly under the pretense of business trips, sending money monthly to support their education and living expenses. I thought about all those business trips, the conferences in Atlanta and Chicago that required extended travel, the insurance industry meetings that kept him away for a week at a time. James had always been so detailed about his travel plans, showing me itineraries and calling every evening from his hotel room. How had he been living a double life elaborate enough to include 2 children without me suspecting anything? Catherine, I know this revelation will destroy you, and I hate myself for the pain I am causing. But you must understand, Fatima died 3 years ago from cancer. Since then, I have been the only parent these children have known, caring for them from a distance while they live with Fatima's elderly uncle in Marrakech. 3 years ago. I remembered that period clearly. James had seemed depressed and distracted, claiming work stress and health concerns about aging. I'd attributed his mood changes to normal midlife anxieties, encouraged him to see our doctor, suggested he consider reducing his workload. Never once had it occurred to me that my husband was grieving the death of another woman, processing loss that he couldn't share with me. I have set aside $200,000 in a separate account to ensure Yassine and Amina can complete their education. Yassine dreams of studying engineering at an American university. Amina is brilliant and wants to become a doctor. They both speak perfect English and French, and they have known about you their entire lives. Catherine, they know you exist, they know you are their father's wife, and they understand that you are the only family they have left in the world. I felt nauseous reading about these children who'd grown up knowing about me, while I'd been completely ignorant of their existence. What had James told them about his American wife who couldn't give him children? How had he explained his absence, his divided loyalty, his choice to maintain 2 separate families on different continents? I am leaving you an address in Marrakech. Ahmad Ben Ali, Fatima's uncle, is 78 years old and can no longer properly care for 2 teenagers. Catherine, I am asking, no, I am begging you to go to Morocco and meet Yassine and Amina. They are wonderful, intelligent, loving children who have lost everything and everyone they've ever depended on. I walked to James's world map, the same map I'd stared at countless times during our marriage, without knowing that my husband had a secret life in North Africa. Morocco seemed impossibly distant from our comfortable existence in Hartford, as foreign and unreachable as James had always made our life seem predictable and contained. But apparently, for 15 years, James had been traveling to this exotic destination regularly, building relationships and responsibilities that he'd hidden from me with elaborate precision. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after this betrayal. I know that learning about Fatima and the children will cause you pain that I can never repair. But Catherine, these children need someone who understands education, who values learning, who can guide them toward the futures they deserve. They need a mother. A mother. The word I'd longed to claim for myself throughout our marriage, the identity that had been medically impossible for me to achieve, now being offered through the children my husband had created with another woman. Yassine and Amina are not responsible for the choices I made. They are innocent children who have lost both parents and have nowhere else to turn. Catherine, you have so much love to give, so much wisdom and strength. You would be an incredible mother to them if you can find it in your heart to forgive my betrayal and embrace this unexpected opportunity. I read the final pages through tears, absorbing James's detailed descriptions of Yassine's academic achievements and dreams of studying engineering in America, of Amina's brilliance in mathematics and her determination to become a doctor despite the educational limitations for women in Morocco. I am leaving you the choice, Catherine. You can ignore this letter, let the children remain with Ahmad until he dies, and allow them to face an uncertain future in Morocco. Or you can travel to Marrakesh, meet the remarkable young people who carry my genes and Fatima's wisdom, and consider whether you might want to become their mother. I pray that you can forgive me enough to give Yassine and Amina the chance I never had the courage to offer you directly. They are the children we always wanted, Catherine. They just came to us in a way neither of us could have anticipated. I sat in James's chair, holding 8 pages that had transformed me from a grieving widow into a woman facing the most important decision of her life. Somewhere in Morocco, 2 teenagers were waiting for news about their future, depending on whether their father's betrayed wife could find enough love and forgiveness to embrace the children that her infertility had made impossible, but James's faithlessness had made real. The envelope also contained the Marrakech address and copies of legal documents establishing James's paternity and financial responsibilities. Everything I needed to find the children who didn't know that their distant father had died 6 months ago, leaving them completely alone in the world, except for an American woman they'd never met. Some secrets, I was discovering, weren't just about betrayal. They were about opportunity disguised as devastating loss. Tomorrow, I would book a flight to Morocco to meet the children I'd never had. I didn't tell my friends or James's family about the letter. How could I explain that my husband of 40 years had maintained a secret family in Morocco, while I'd spent decades grieving our childlessness? Instead, I told everyone I needed time alone to process my grief and was taking a short trip to gain perspective on rebuilding my life. The flight to Casablanca gave me 13 hours to imagine meeting children who knew me as Papa's wife in America, while I'd never known they existed. James's letter had included photographs. Yassine was tall and serious-looking, with James's eyes and dark hair. Amina was petite, with an infectious smile and the kind of intelligence that radiated from her expression. They looked like the children James and I might have had if genetics had been kinder to us. During the connection in Paris, I sat in the terminal reading James's letter for the dozenth time, trying to understand how he'd managed such elaborate deception. The business trips that had seemed perfectly legitimate, the detailed itineraries he'd shared with me, the phone calls from hotel rooms that I now realized might have been from Moroccan guest houses. James had been living a double life so sophisticated that I'd never suspected anything unusual about his travel patterns. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that James had found a way to become a father while watching me grieve our childlessness for decades. He'd seen my pain every Mother's Day, every baby shower invitation that broke my heart, every friend's pregnancy announcement that reminded me of what we couldn't have. And all the while, he'd been secretly raising 2 children with another woman. The taxi ride from Marrakesh airport to the address James had provided was overwhelming. The ancient city walls, the palm trees, the mixture of Arabic and French languages created a sensory experience unlike anything I'd encountered in my careful, predictable life. This was the world James had been visiting twice yearly, the place where his children had grown up while I'd been teaching French to Connecticut teenagers. Number 12. Rue des Palmiers was a traditional Moroccan house with a blue door decorated with geometric patterns. I stood outside, holding James's letter, and wondering what I would say to children who'd lost both parents and were now depending on a woman they'd never met to determine their future. I knocked 3 times, my heart pounding with anxiety about meeting adolescents who would be grieving their father while discovering that their only remaining guardian was a stranger from another continent. The door opened to reveal an elderly man with kind eyes and traditional Moroccan clothing. Behind him, I could see 2 teenagers watching nervously from the hallway. A tall boy and a smaller girl who matched the photographs James had included with his confession. "Madame Catherine?" the elderly man asked in accented English. "Yes, I'm Catherine Morrison. You must be Ahmad. Please, come in. The children have been waiting to meet you." I followed Ahmad into a traditional Moroccan living room where Yassine and Amina sat on low cushions, both of them studying me with expressions that mixed hope, uncertainty, and profound sadness. They looked exactly like their photographs, but seeing them in person made the reality of James's secret life devastatingly concrete. "Yassine, Amina," Ahmad said gently. "This is your father's wife, Madame Catherine." Yassine stood up with formal politeness that suggested careful upbringing. He was taller than I'd expected, probably 6 feet, with James's facial structure, but more delicate features that must have come from Fatima. "Madame Catherine, thank you for coming to see us," he said, in perfect English with a slight British accent. "We are very sad about Papa's death, and we know you must be sad too." Amina remained seated, her large dark eyes studying me with the intensity of someone trying to assess whether I might be trustworthy or threatening to her security. "We weren't sure if you would come," she said quietly. "Papa always said you were kind, but we didn't know if you would want to meet us." The careful way they spoke about their father revealed that James had discussed me with them regularly, creating a relationship where they knew about their father's American wife while I'd been completely ignorant of their existence. "Your father wrote me a letter explaining about your family," I said, choosing my words carefully. "He wanted me to meet you and understand your situation." Ahmad gestured for me to sit on the cushions across from the children. "Madame Catherine, perhaps you would like tea while we talk about the children's circumstances." As Ahmad prepared mint tea, I sat with Yassine and Amina in awkward silence, all of us processing the strangeness of meeting family members who were simultaneously strangers and intimately connected through James's secret life. "Papa talked about you often," Yassine said eventually. "He said you were a teacher who loved books and that you would understand why education is important to us. He said you tried to have children but couldn't," Amina added, with the directness that adolescents sometimes used when discussing sensitive topics. "Papa explained that's why you never visited us, because it would be too sad for you to see children that weren't yours." I felt tears forming as I realized that James had used my infertility to explain his compartmentalized life to his Moroccan children. He'd portrayed me as too emotionally fragile to handle knowing about their existence, when the truth was that he'd been too cowardly to tell me he'd found another woman who could give him children. "Your father was protecting both of us from a very complicated situation," I said carefully. "Madame Catherine," Yassine said, his voice taking on the seriousness that suggested he'd been forced to mature quickly after losing both parents. "Uncle Ahmad is too old to take care of us much longer. Papa promised he would arrange for our education in America, but we don't know what happens now. Papa left money for us to go to university," Amina added, "but we need someone to help us apply and arrange everything. Uncle Ahmad doesn't understand American schools." I looked at these 2 intelligent teenagers who were politely asking for help while trying to hide their desperation about their uncertain future. They'd lost their mother 3 years ago, their father 6 months ago, and now faced the possibility that their educational dreams would disappear because there was no adult capable of navigating international education systems on their behalf. "What do you want to study?" I asked. "Engineering," Yassine said immediately. "Papa said American universities have the best engineering programs, and I want to design bridges and buildings." "Medicine," Amina said. "I want to be a doctor and help people, but women can't easily become doctors here in Morocco." I listened to these children describe dreams that were exactly the kind of ambitions James and I would have encouraged in our own children, if we'd been able to have them. They were intelligent, motivated, and articulate about their goals in ways that suggested excellent parenting from both James and Fatima. "Your father's letter explained that you need someone to help you navigate American education and immigration," I said. "Yes, madame, but we don't want to be a burden to anyone. We just need guidance about applications and legal requirements. I looked at Yasin and Amina, these remarkable teenagers who were trying to be independent and responsible, while clearly needing adult support to achieve their educational goals. James had been right that they deserved guidance from someone who understood both education and the emotional support that adolescents required during major life transitions. I think, I said slowly, that we should discuss what kind of help you actually need and what I might be able to provide. Some opportunities, I was beginning to understand, came disguised as betrayals too painful to comprehend immediately. But sitting with James's children, I started to glimpse the possibility that his devastating confession might have been an unexpected gift rather than just a cruel revelation about the lies that had defined our marriage. Ahmad served mint tea in traditional glasses, while the four of us sat in the comfortable silence that seemed to indicate everyone was processing the magnitude of what we were discussing. I studied Yasin and Amina's faces, looking for traces of James, while trying to understand how I felt about meeting children who were both innocent victims of their father's deception and living reminders of his betrayal. Papa visited us twice each year, Yasin explained as we sipped the sweet tea. He would stay for 2 weeks, help with our schoolwork, and tell us stories about America and his work. He brought us books and educational materials, Amina added. Papa said American education was different from Moroccan schools and that we needed to prepare ourselves if we wanted to study there. I felt a complex mixture of emotions listening to them describe James's involvement in their lives. He'd been an active, caring father to children I'd never known existed, while maintaining the facade of our childless marriage with me. Every business trip that had taken him away from me had been a chance to be with his secret family. Did your father tell you about his life in America? I asked. He told us about your house and your garden, Yasin said. He said you grew tomatoes and flowers, and that you read books in French and English. Papa showed us photographs of you, Amina said quietly. We have a picture of your wedding day on the shelf in our room. The idea that James's Moroccan children had been looking at photographs of our wedding while I'd been completely ignorant of their existence created a surreal sense of intimacy with strangers. They knew details about my life while I was just learning that they existed. Ahmad cleared his throat gently. Madame Catherine, perhaps I should explain the children's current situation more clearly. Please, I'd like to understand everything. Fatima died 3 years ago after a long illness with cancer. James arranged for the best medical care, but Ahmad's voice trailed off with the sadness of someone who'd watched a beloved family member suffer. After Mama died, Papa visited more often, Yasin said. He came 3 times last year instead of twice, and he stayed longer each time. But Papa never said anything about bringing us to America while he was alive, Amina added. He said it was complicated because of legal issues and paperwork. I realized that James had been planning to tell me about his children eventually, but had died before finding the courage to confess his double life. His letter suggested that he'd been preparing to integrate his 2 families somehow, but his sudden heart attack had left everyone in an impossible situation. Uncle Ahmad has been taking care of us since Mama died, Yasin explained, but he's getting old and has health problems. He can't help us with university applications or visa paperwork for America. The children are good students, Ahmad said with pride. Yasin has excellent grades in mathematics and science. Amina speaks 4 languages and excels in all her subjects. 4 languages? I asked Amina, impressed despite my emotional confusion. Arabic, French, English, and Spanish, she said with a slight smile. Papa said languages would be important for my medical studies. Amina tutors younger children in our neighborhood, Yasin added. She's very smart and patient with teaching. I could see why James had been proud of these children. They were articulate, ambitious, and mature in ways that suggested excellent parenting, despite the unusual circumstances of their upbringing. Madame Catherine, Ahmad said carefully, James left legal documents naming you as the children's guardian if anything happened to him. But of course, this would only be valid if you choose to accept this responsibility. Guardian? I hadn't seen that detail in James's letter, though he'd hinted at legal arrangements. Papa made papers with lawyers, Yasin explained. He said if something happened to him, you would be our legal guardian so we could come to America for school. The magnitude of what James had arranged without consulting me was staggering. He'd legally committed me to becoming the guardian of children I'd never met, assuming that I would accept this responsibility based solely on his letter explaining their existence. Did your father discuss this guardianship arrangement with you? I asked the children. Papa said it was just for emergencies, Amina said. He said you were very kind and would help us if we needed it, but that he hoped you would never have to worry about us. But Papa died, Yasin added quietly. So now we need help, and you're the only family we have. The simple way Yasin stated their situation, that I was their only family, hit me with unexpected emotional force. These children had lost both parents and had nowhere else to turn except to a woman they'd never met who lived on another continent. What happens if I can't take guardianship? I asked Ahmad. The children would remain here with me until I can no longer care for them, Ahmad said honestly. After that, they would probably live with distant relatives who cannot afford to support their education. We would miss our chance to go to American universities, Yasin said matter-of-factly. The money Papa left would eventually be used for basic living expenses instead of education. Madame Catherine, Amina said, looking directly at me with James's eyes, we don't want to force you to take care of us. We know this is very difficult for you, learning about us after Papa died. But we hope, Yasin added, that you might want to help us achieve the dreams that Papa and Mama had for our education. I looked at these two remarkable teenagers who were politely asking for their futures while trying not to pressure me into accepting responsibility I'd never agreed to take on. James had put us all in an impossible situation, them by making them dependent on a stranger's goodwill, and me by committing me to care for children whose existence he'd hidden throughout our marriage. I need to understand more about what guardianship would involve, I said. The legal requirements, the immigration process, the educational arrangements. I have documents that James prepared, Ahmad said, standing to retrieve a folder from a cabinet. Everything is organized for the children to obtain student visas and move to America for their education. As Ahmad spread out visa applications, school enrollment forms, and legal guardianship papers, I realized that James had spent years preparing for the possibility that I would need to care for his Moroccan children. Every document was completed except for my signature, every application ready except for my consent. Papa was very thorough, Yasin said, noting my surprise at the extensive paperwork. He always said that education required careful planning. Some secrets I was discovering weren't just about deception. They were about hope and preparation for futures that required courage from people who'd never agreed to the responsibilities being placed on their shoulders. Looking at Yasin and Amina, I began to understand that James hadn't just left me a confession about his betrayal. He'd left me the chance to become the mother I'd always wanted to be, even if it meant accepting children who were living proof of his faithlessness. That night, Ahmad arranged for me to stay in a nearby riad while I processed everything I'd learned about James's secret family. I lay awake on the traditional Moroccan bed, staring at the geometric patterns on the ceiling and trying to reconcile the man I'd thought I'd known with the father who'd spent 15 years preparing elaborate documentation to ensure his children's future education. The folder Ahmad had shown me contained meticulous planning that revealed a side of James I'd never seen. Completed visa applications, researched university programs, financial arrangements that would fund both children's education through graduate degrees. James had been preparing for years for the possibility that something might happen to him, ensuring that Yasin and Amina would have every opportunity to succeed in America under my guardianship. But he'd never asked my permission to make me responsible for children whose existence he'd hidden from me for their entire lives. I returned to the house the next morning to find Yasin and Amina helping Ahmad prepare breakfast, all three of them moving around the kitchen with the easy familiarity of people who'd been living as a family unit. Watching them together, I could see how much the children meant to their elderly guardian and how much they depended on his care and stability. Madame Catherine, Amina said as she served me traditional Moroccan bread, Uncle Ahmad told us you might want to see our school records and our work. I brought my portfolio from art class, Yasin added, and my mathematics competition certificates. They'd prepared presentations of their academic achievements, like job applicants trying to convince an employer of their worthiness. I realized these children were essentially interviewing for the chance to have me become their guardian, understanding that their entire future depended on whether I could accept the responsibility James had assigned to me. I'd like to see your work, but first, I want to understand your daily life here. What is your routine? What do you enjoy doing? What worries you? Amina and Yasin exchanged glances, apparently not expecting questions about their personal lives rather than their academic qualifications. We walk to school together every morning, Amina said. It takes 20 minutes, and we practice English conversation during the walk. After school, we help Uncle Ahmad with shopping and housework, Yasin added. Then we study for 3 hours every evening. What about friends? Activities outside school? We have some friends at school, Amina said carefully. But we spend most of our time studying because Papa said American universities require excellent grades. We play soccer sometimes with boys from our neighborhood, Yasin said, and Amina likes to draw, though she doesn't have much time for art. I realized these children had been living with single-minded focus on academic achievement, sacrificing normal teenage activities because they understood that education was their only path to the future their parents had envisioned for them. What worries you most about your current situation? They looked at Ahmad before Yasin answered honestly. We worry that Uncle Ahmad is getting too old to take care of us, and that we might lose our chance to go to American universities if we don't have an adult guardian who understands the application processes. We worry that we'll disappoint Papa by not achieving the dreams he had for us, Amina added quietly. And we worry, Yasin said, looking directly at me, that you might not want to become our guardian, because we represent painful reminders of Papa's secrets. The mature way they articulated their concerns revealed how much thought they'd given to their precarious situation, and how clearly they understood that their futures depended entirely on my decision. Can I ask you something difficult? I said. They nodded seriously. How do you feel about your father having 2 families, about him being married to me, while he was also Fatima's partner? Amina looked at Yasin, who seemed to be the designated spokesperson for sensitive topics. Papa explained that he loved both you and Mama, but in different ways, Yasin said carefully. He said that you were his wife and partner in America, and that Mama was his companion and the mother of his children in Morocco. Papa said that sometimes good people make complicated choices because life doesn't give them simple options, Amina added. Did you ever feel confused or upset about this arrangement? Sometimes, Amina admitted, especially when other children at school asked about why our father lived in another country. But Papa always made it clear that he loved us and that he was working to give us the best possible future, Yasin said. We understood that his life was complicated, but we never doubted that he cared about us. I felt struck by their maturity in discussing a family situation that would challenge most adults' understanding of loyalty and love. James had apparently raised them to accept complexity without bitterness, to focus on his devotion rather than his deception. Madame Catherine, Amina said hesitantly, may we ask you something difficult? Of course. Are you angry at Papa for having us? Do you wish we didn't exist? The question hit me like a physical blow, forcing me to confront feelings I'd been avoiding since reading James's letter. Was I angry? Did I wish these children didn't exist? I'm angry at your father for lying to me for 15 years, I said honestly. I'm hurt that he shared the experience of being a parent with someone else while watching me grieve our inability to have children. They listened without defending James, apparently understanding that my pain was legitimate even if it complicated their hopes for guardianship. But I'm not angry at you, I continued. You didn't choose this complicated situation, and you're not responsible for the choices your father made. Do you think you could ever forgive Papa enough to help us? Yasin asked. I looked at these 2 intelligent, thoughtful teenagers who were asking for forgiveness on behalf of their dead father, while hoping I might become the guardian they desperately needed. I think forgiveness is complicated, I said. But I also think that whether I can forgive your father is separate from whether I can care about your futures. Does that mean you might consider becoming our guardian? I thought about my life in Connecticut, the empty house, the quiet routines, the careful predictability that had defined my existence since James's death. Then I looked at Yasin and Amina, these remarkable young people who needed guidance, support, and love from someone who understood the value of education and the importance of pursuing dreams despite complicated circumstances. I think it means we should spend more time together so I can understand what kind of guardian you need and whether I'm capable of providing it. Some decisions, I was learning, required more than forgiveness or anger. They required the courage to embrace possibilities that arrived disguised as impossible complications. And some children were worth considering even when they came attached to betrayals too painful to fully process. I spent the next 3 days living as part of their household, observing how Yasin and Amina navigated their daily lives, while Ahmad graciously included me in their family routines. What I discovered was a home filled with love, respect, and quiet determination despite the losses they'd all endured. Madame Catherine, would you like to see our neighborhood school? Amina asked on my 3rd morning in Marrakesh. We could walk there together like we do every day. The 20-minute walk to their school revealed more about their characters than any academic portfolio could have shown. Yasin helped elderly neighbors carry groceries, Amina stopped to pet stray cats, and both children greeted shop owners and street vendors with genuine warmth that suggested deep community connections. "We like living here," Yasin explained as we walked past the morning markets. "But we know our educational opportunities are limited compared to American universities. Papa always said that loving your home doesn't mean you can't dream of expanding your world," Amina added. At their school, I met teachers who spoke about both children with unmistakable affection and respect. Yasin's mathematics teacher described him as exceptional, with problem-solving abilities that exceeded grade-level expectations. Amina's science teacher said she asked questions that challenged even university-level concepts. "They are serious students," the principal told me in French, "but they are also kind children who help their classmates and volunteer for community service projects." "What community service do you do?" I asked as we walked home. "We teach French to younger children," Amina explained, "and Yasin helps repair bicycles for families who can't afford professional mechanics." "I learned bike repair from Papa," Yasin said proudly. He said practical skills were as important as academic knowledge. That afternoon, Ahmad took me aside for a private conversation while the children studied in their room. "Madam Catherine, I must tell you something important about these children that goes beyond their academic abilities." "What do you mean?" "When Fatima died, Yasin and Amina were devastated. They had lost their mother, and their father could only visit them occasionally. I watched them support each other through grief that would have destroyed many adults." Ahmad led me to the window, where we could see Yasin helping Amina with her mathematics homework. Both of them concentrated on the problems while speaking softly to avoid disturbing their uncle's rest. They never complained about James's absence, never expressed anger about their complicated family situation, never acted out because of the loss and uncertainty they faced, Ahmad continued. "These children have remarkable emotional maturity because they've learned to find strength in each other and hope in their dreams." "Ahmad, can I ask you something difficult? How did you feel about James having two families?" The elderly man was quiet for several minutes, apparently considering how much truth to share with someone he'd just met. "I loved Fatima very much," he said finally. "She was like a daughter to me after her parents died. When she told me about James, I was concerned because I didn't understand how a married man could also be a good father to her children." "And what changed your mind?" "James proved his devotion through 15 years of consistent care and support. He never missed a visit, never forgot a birthday, never failed to send money when it was needed. Whatever complications existed in his American life, his commitment to Fatima and the children was absolute." "But did you think what he was doing was right?" Ahmad smiled sadly. "Madame Catherine, I am old enough to understand that life is rarely simple enough for easy judgments about right and wrong. James was a good father to Yasin and Amina, and from what I observed, he was also a loving husband to you. How could you know anything about his relationship with me? Because he talked about you constantly. How proud he was of your teaching, how much he missed your conversations, how guilty he felt about the secrets he was keeping. James carried pictures of both his families and spoke about both with equal love. That evening, after dinner, Yasin asked if I wanted to see the letters and photographs James had sent them over the years. Their room was modest, but carefully organized, with school books, art supplies, and a small collection of American educational materials James had provided. "Papa sent us books about American history and culture," Amina said, showing me a shelf of carefully maintained volumes. "He wanted us to understand the country we might move to someday. And he sent photographs from your life together," Yasin added, pulling out an album that took my breath away. Inside were pictures spanning our entire marriage, our wedding photos, vacation pictures, Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations. Images of our life that James had apparently shared with his Moroccan children while building their connection to the American family they might one day join. "Papa told us stories about these pictures," Amina said, pointing to a photograph of me in my garden. "He said you grew beautiful flowers and that you read books outside when the weather was nice. This is our favorite," Yasin said, showing me a picture of James and me laughing at something during a beach vacation. "Papa said this was taken when you told a funny story about your students and that making you laugh was one of his greatest pleasures." I stared at these images of our marriage through the eyes of children who'd been watching our life from a distance, learning about their father's American family while I'd been completely ignorant of their existence. "Did you ever resent me?" I asked, "for having your father's daily presence while you only saw him twice a year?" Sometimes, Amina admitted quietly, but Papa explained that you and he had built a life together before we were born, and that you deserved his love and loyalty just as much as we did. Papa said that someday, if circumstances allowed, he hoped we could all be one family, Yasin added. He said you would love us if you met us, and that we would love you because you were part of what made Papa happy. I realized that James had been preparing all of us for this eventual meeting, hoping that someday his two families could be integrated into something functional and loving. His death had forced that integration to happen under the worst possible circumstances, but his careful groundwork had created possibilities that might not have existed otherwise. Madame Catherine, Amina said carefully, if you decide to become our guardian, what would that mean for our daily lives? It would mean moving to America, enrolling in American schools, learning to live in a very different culture from what you've known here. Would we live with you in your house? Yasin asked. If I become your guardian, yes, you would live with me. And would you help us apply to universities and pursue our dreams? I looked at these two remarkable teenagers who were asking for the chance to build their futures under my guidance, and realized that my answer would determine not only their destinies, but also my own transformation from grieving widow to unexpected mother. If I become your guardian, I will do everything in my power to help you achieve the dreams your parents had for you. Some families, I was discovering, weren't just created through birth or marriage. They could be built through choice, commitment, and the courage to embrace love that arrived in unexpected forms. On my last night in Marrakech before returning to Connecticut, Ahmad prepared a special dinner that felt like a farewell celebration, mixed with nervous anticipation. I hadn't made any final decisions about guardianship, but all four of us understood that the next few weeks would determine whether Yasin and Amina had a future in America or would remain in Morocco with increasingly uncertain prospects. Madame Catherine, Ahmad said, as we shared traditional tagine, before you leave tomorrow, there is something else you should know about James and his relationship with the children. What do you mean? Ahmad retrieved a wooden box from a cabinet and placed it on the table between us. These are letters that James wrote to Yasin and Amina over the years, and letters they wrote to him. Perhaps reading them will help you understand the depth of the relationship you would be continuing if you choose to become their guardian. I opened the box to find dozens of letters in both James's handwriting and the children's developing penmanship, spanning years of correspondence that revealed a father-child bond built through distance but sustained through consistent communication. One letter from James to 10-year-old Yasin read, I am so proud of your mathematics grades, son. Remember that engineering requires both technical knowledge and creative problem solving. Keep asking questions about how things work, and someday you'll design buildings and bridges that will help people for generations. Another letter to 8-year-old Amina said, you wrote that you want to be a doctor to help people feel better. That is a beautiful dream, and I know you have the intelligence and compassion to achieve it. Study hard, be kind to others, and never let anyone tell you that girls can't become excellent physicians. Reading James's letters to his children revealed a side of him I'd never seen. A father who took deep interest in their academic progress, emotional development, and future dreams. He'd been an involved parent from thousands of miles away, providing guidance and encouragement that had clearly shaped both children into the remarkable young people they'd become. Papa wrote to us every month, Yasin explained. He would tell us about his work, ask about our studies, and share stories about America and his life there. He never forgot our birthdays or important school events, Amina added. Even when he couldn't be here, he made sure we knew he was thinking about us. I found letters the children had written to James, equally revealing about the relationship they'd built through correspondence. Dear Papa, I got the highest score in my class on the science test about human anatomy. My teacher said I ask very good questions about how the body works. I think about you every day and hope you are proud of me. Love, Amina. Papa, I fixed the neighbor's bicycle using the tools and techniques you taught me. He was very happy because he couldn't afford to pay a repair shop. Thank you for teaching me that helping others is as important as helping yourself. Your son, Yasin. These letters show 15 years of active fatherhood, I said to Ahmad. James wasn't just supporting them financially. He was genuinely involved in their lives. Yes, and the children wrote to him about everything. Their struggles at school, their friendships, their dreams, their worries. James was a real father to them, even from a distance. After dinner, Yasin and Amina asked if they could show me one more thing before I left for America. We made something for you, Amina said shyly, in case you decide to become our guardian. They led me to their room and presented a handmade book they'd created titled Our Family Story. Inside were photographs, drawings, and written descriptions of their lives, their dreams, and their memories of both parents. One page showed a drawing Amina had made of what she imagined our American family might look like. Herself, Yassine, and me, standing in front of a house with a garden, all three of us smiling. Another page contained Yassine's written description of his engineering dreams and how grateful he would be for the opportunity to study in America. The final page contained a letter they'd written together. Dear Madame Catherine, we know that becoming our guardian would be very difficult for you because of the complicated situation Papa created. We don't want to make your life harder or force you to take care of us. But if you decide that you can love us even though we remind you of Papa's secrets, we promise to be the best family we can be. We will study hard, help with housework, respect your rules, and try to make you proud to be our guardian. We hope that someday you might think of us not as Papa's betrayal, but as your children. With love and hope, Yassine and Amina. I felt tears forming as I read their letter, recognizing the courage it had taken for them to create this gift, while knowing that I might reject their hopes for guardianship and return to America without them. This is beautiful, I managed to say. Thank you for sharing your story with me. Madame Catherine, Yassine said carefully, when you go back to America, will you think about whether you might want to be our mother? The word mother hung in the air between us, carrying decades of my unfulfilled dreams and their desperate need for family stability. These children weren't just asking for guardianship. They were asking if I could love them as the children James and I had never been able to have together. I promise to think very carefully about everything I've learned here, I said, about your dreams, your characters, your needs, and whether I'm capable of being the kind of guardian you deserve. And will you think about whether we could make you happy? Amina asked quietly. We know you've been sad since Papa died, and we don't want to make your sadness worse. I looked at these two remarkable teenagers who were more concerned about my emotional welfare than their own uncertain future, and realized that James had been right about their characters. They were extraordinary young people who deserved every opportunity to pursue their dreams. I think, I said slowly, that you've already made me happier than I've been in months, just by letting me get to know you. That night, I lay awake in my Riyadh room thinking about the choice I faced. I could return to Connecticut and continue my quiet life as a grieving widow, leaving Yassine and Amina to face an uncertain future in Morocco. Or I could embrace the opportunity James had left me, the chance to finally become a mother, even if it meant accepting children who were living proof of his betrayal. Some gifts, I was learning, came wrapped in the most painful circumstances imaginable, but they were still gifts, if I had the courage to unwrap them. Tomorrow, I would fly back to America to decide whether I was brave enough to become a mother at 68, whether I could forgive James enough to embrace the children he'd hidden from me, and whether love could be powerful enough to transform betrayal into unexpected blessing. The flight back to Connecticut gave me 18 hours to process everything I'd experienced in Marrakesh, but landing at Bradley International Airport felt like returning to a different life entirely. My empty house seemed smaller and quieter than I remembered, filled with the absence of James's presence and now haunted by the knowledge of what and who he'd hidden from me for 15 years. I sat at my kitchen table with James's letter, the photographs of Yassine and Amina, and the handmade book they'd created, trying to reconcile the betrayed wife's anger with the potential mother's yearning. These children needed me, but accepting guardianship would mean permanently altering my life in ways I'd never anticipated at 68. The next morning, I called my longtime friend Margaret, the only person I trusted enough to share the truth about James's secret family. Catherine, you're telling me that James had 2 children in Morocco for 15 years and never mentioned them? Never. Not once in 40 years of marriage did he give any indication that he had relationships or responsibilities there. And now these children need you to become their legal guardian? They need someone who can help them immigrate to America for their education. Margaret, they're exceptional students with dreams of studying engineering and medicine, but they'll lose those opportunities if they don't have an American guardian. Catherine, this is an enormous decision. You're talking about becoming a mother to teenagers while you're still processing your husband's death and betrayal. I know it sounds impossible, but Margaret, meeting them changed something for me. They're not just reminders of James's lies. They're remarkable young people who deserve the chance to pursue their dreams. What does your heart tell you? I thought about Yasin's quiet dignity as he helped his elderly uncle with daily tasks, about Amina's infectious enthusiasm when discussing her medical aspirations, about the way both children had treated me with kindness, despite understanding that I might reject their hopes for a future in America. My heart tells me that James may have given me the gift I always wanted, even if he delivered it in the most painful way possible. The next week, I met with the lawyer who'd handled James's estate to discuss the legal implications of international guardianship and the immigration requirements for bringing Yasin and Amina to America. Mrs. Morrison, your husband's documentation is remarkably thorough. He's prepared every legal requirement for the children to obtain student visas and enter the U.S. under your guardianship. What would my responsibilities be if I accept guardianship? You'd be legally responsible for their welfare, education, and living arrangements until they reach adulthood. You'd need to enroll them in American schools, provide housing and support, and guide them through the university application process. And if I choose not to accept guardianship, the children would remain in Morocco with their current guardian until other arrangements could be made. The educational funds James set aside would eventually be used for basic living expenses rather than American university tuition. I spent the following days researching local schools, university admission requirements for international students, and the practical considerations of suddenly becoming responsible for two teenagers. The logistics seemed manageable, but the emotional complexity was overwhelming. Could I look at James's children every day without being reminded of his betrayal? Could I love them as my own, despite the pain their existence represented? Could I provide the kind of guidance and support they needed while processing my own grief and anger? 2 weeks after returning from Morocco, I received a letter from Yasin and Amina that made my decision crystallize. Dear Madame Catherine, we hope you arrived safely in America and that you are well. Uncle Ahmad is having more difficulty with his health, and we are worried about his ability to continue caring for us. We don't want to pressure you about your decision regarding guardianship, but we wanted you to know that we think about you every day and hope you might choose to become our family. We have been studying American culture and education systems in case you decide to bring us to America. Yasin has been practicing English with our neighbors who studied in Britain, and Amina has been reading about American medical schools and their admission requirements. Madame Catherine, we know that accepting us would be difficult because of the circumstances Papa created, but we also know that you have so much love and wisdom to share, and we would be honored to be your children if you choose to give us that opportunity. We are enclosing our most recent school reports and letters from our teachers, not because we want to convince you with our academic achievements, but because we want you to see that we are serious students who would make the most of any educational opportunities you might provide. With love and gratitude for considering our future, Yasin and Amina. I read their letter 3 times, struck by their maturity, their consideration for my emotional state, and their unwavering focus on education despite their uncertain circumstances. These children had been raised to value learning, respect others, and pursue their dreams with determination. Exactly the kind of young people James and I would have wanted as our own children. That evening, I called Marrakesh to speak with Ahmad about the children's current situation and his health concerns. Madame Catherine, I am so happy to hear your voice. How are you processing your decision about the children? Ahmad, I'm calling because I've made my decision. I want to begin the legal process to bring Yasin and Amina to America as my wards. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 10 seconds before Ahmad responded with obvious emotion. Madame Catherine, you are giving these children the greatest gift possible, the chance to honor their parents' dreams while building their own futures. Ahmad, I need you to know that this decision isn't about forgiving James or accepting what he did to our marriage. This is about recognizing that Yasin and Amina are innocent, remarkable young people who deserve every opportunity to succeed. And for you, Madame, what does this decision mean for your own life? I thought about the question, realizing that accepting guardianship of James's children would transform me from a betrayed wife into a purposeful woman with important responsibilities and relationships. It means that at 68, I'm finally going to become a mother. Madame Catherine, may I tell the children about your decision? Yes. And Ahmad, please tell them that we have a lot of work to do over the next few months to prepare for their move to America. After ending the call, I sat in James's study looking at his world map, this time seeing Morocco not as the site of his betrayal, but as the home of 2 children who would soon be living in my house, attending American schools, and working toward the dreams their father had encouraged them to pursue. Some forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't about accepting betrayal. It was about choosing to build something meaningful from the wreckage of deception. James had lied to me for 15 years, but he'd also left me the opportunity to finally experience the motherhood that had been medically impossible during our marriage. Tomorrow, I would begin the paperwork to bring my children home to America. The word children felt revolutionary. At 68, I was about to become what I'd always dreamed of being, a mother guiding young people toward their brightest possible futures. 4 months of paperwork, visa applications, and international legal procedures finally concluded on a warm September morning when I stood in the international arrivals terminal at JFK Airport, holding a sign that read, Yasin and Amina Ben Ali, and fighting back tears of anticipation and terror. The past months had been a whirlwind of practical preparation mixed with emotional processing. I'd converted James's study into a bedroom for Yasin, redecorated the guest room for Amina, researched the local high school system, and spent countless hours on phone calls with immigration lawyers and educational consultants. But nothing could have prepared me for the reality of watching 2 teenagers emerge from customs with everything they owned packed in 3 suitcases, looking around the crowded airport for the American woman who'd agreed to become their guardian. "Madam Catherine?" Amina spotted me first and ran toward me with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been traveling for 24 hours to reach safety and opportunity. Yasin followed more cautiously, but his smile was genuine as he approached this woman who represented his future in America. "Welcome home," I said, embracing them both, and realizing that the word home had taken on new meaning now that I was responsible for creating a place where these children could feel safe, loved, and supported. The drive from JFK to Hartford gave us 2 hours to begin the conversation about practical arrangements for our new life together. I'd prepared carefully for their arrival, stocking the refrigerator with foods I'd researched about Moroccan preferences, printing out schedules for their school enrollment, organizing all the documentation they'd need to begin their American education. "The house is smaller than what you're used to in Marrakech," I explained, as we drove through Connecticut suburbs that probably looked impossibly foreign to children who'd grown up surrounded by ancient architecture and bustling markets. "Madam Catherine, any house where we can live together as a family is perfect for us," Yasin said from the back seat, his formal politeness suggesting nervousness about making a good impression on his new guardian. "And we brought photographs of Uncle Ahmad in our home in Morocco," Amina added. "We hope it's all right if we display them in our rooms so we can remember where we came from. Of course, this is your home now, and I want you to feel comfortable making it reflect who you are." When we arrived at my house, now our house, both children stood in the driveway, looking at the modest colonial structure that would be their residence for the next several years. "It's beautiful," Amina said, though I suspected she was being diplomatic about a house that bore no resemblance to the traditional Moroccan architecture they'd grown up with. "The garden is lovely," Yasin observed, noting the flower beds I'd been tending for decades. "Papa told us you grew beautiful plants." Inside, they explored their new bedrooms with the careful politeness of houseguests who weren't sure about the rules for personalizing their spaces. I'd spent weeks decorating their rooms with what I'd hoped would be welcoming touches: maps of both Morocco and the United States, desk areas for studying, bookshelves stocked with both educational materials and recreational reading. "Madame Catherine, this is more space than we've ever had for our personal belongings," Yasin said, looking around his room with something approaching amazement. "And you put maps on the walls so we can remember both countries," Amina noted, touching the colorful map of Morocco with obvious affection. That evening, as we shared our first dinner together in Connecticut, the reality of our new family dynamic began to settle in. These were James's children, sitting at the table where James and I had shared 40 years of meals, but they were also my responsibility now, depending on me for guidance about everything from school enrollment to social navigation in American culture. "I know this is overwhelming for all of us," I said, as we ate the Moroccan-inspired meal I'd attempted to prepare. "We're basically strangers who've agreed to become a family, and that's going to require patience and communication from everyone. Madam Catherine, we want you to know that we understand this is difficult for you too," Yasin said. "We're grateful that you chose to become our guardian, but we also know that having teenagers move into your quiet life is a big change. What do you need from me to feel comfortable and successful here?" I asked. "We need your help with understanding American school systems and university applications," Amina said, "and we need guidance about American social customs, so we don't make embarrassing mistakes. But mostly, we need to know that you're happy to have us here, Yassine added quietly. That we're not just an obligation you accepted because Papa asked you to take care of us. I looked at these two remarkable young people who were being so careful not to burden me with their emotional needs while clearly craving assurance that they were wanted rather than merely tolerated. Yassine, Amina, I want you to understand something important. I didn't accept guardianship because your father asked me to. I accepted it because I met you and realized that you're extraordinary people who deserve every opportunity to pursue your dreams. Does that mean you think of us as your children now? Amina asked hesitantly. The question was more complex than she probably realized. Could I think of James's children, living proof of his betrayal, as my own children? Could I separate my love for them from my anger at their father? I think of you as young people I care about deeply and want to help succeed, I said honestly. Whether that becomes the same thing as thinking of you as my children probably depends on how our relationship develops over time. That's fair, Yassine said. We hope that someday you might love us as your children, but we understand that kind of love has to grow naturally. The next morning began the practical work of integrating Yassine and Amina into American teenage life. We spent the day at the local high school, meeting with counselors who reviewed their Moroccan transcripts and placed them in appropriate classes. Yassine tested into advanced mathematics and science courses, while Amina's language skills and academic record earned her placement in honors English and biology. The guidance counselor says we're both academically prepared for American university applications, Yassine reported as we drove home from school registration. And she gave us information about advanced placement courses that could help us earn college credit while we're still in high school, Amina added excitedly. Watching them navigate their first day of American bureaucracy with enthusiasm and determination, I realized that James had been right about their remarkable characters. These children approached every challenge as an opportunity rather than an obstacle, and their focus on education and long-term goals was inspiring even to someone who'd spent her career working with motivated students. That evening, as Yassine and Amina worked on their homework at the kitchen table while I prepared dinner, I felt something shift in my understanding of our family situation. The house felt different. Not empty anymore, but filled with purpose and activity that had been missing since James's death. Madame Catherine, Amina said as she worked on English assignments, may we ask you something about Papa? Of course. Do you think Papa would be proud of us for coming to America and working toward our dreams? I thought about James's elaborate preparations for his children's education. His years of careful planning to ensure they could succeed in American universities, his obvious love for them despite the complicated circumstances of their upbringing. Yes, I think your father would be very proud of your courage and determination. And do you think he would be proud of you for becoming our guardian? The question caught me off guard, forcing me to consider whether James would have approved of the family arrangement his death had created. I think your father would be grateful that someone who values education and family is helping you pursue the dreams he encouraged you to have. Some families, I was discovering, weren't created through conventional circumstances. They were built through commitment, care, and the courage to embrace love that arrived in unexpected packages. Looking at Yassine and Amina bent over their homework, I realized that I was no longer just a betrayed wife or a grieving widow. I was becoming a mother. 1 year after Yassine and Amina arrived in Connecticut, I sat in the auditorium of their high school watching Amina receive the award for highest achievement in advanced biology, while Yassine was recognized for his leadership in the robotics club. As I applauded their accomplishments, I realized that somewhere during the past 12 months, these extraordinary teenagers had transformed from James's hidden children into my own beloved son and daughter. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. The first few months had been filled with cultural adjustments, emotional processing, and the gradual work of building trust between people who'd started as strangers, bound together by circumstance. But watching them navigate American teenage life with determination and grace had awakened maternal instincts I'd never been able to express during my childless marriage. Mom, did you see that Mr. Patterson wants to talk to me about early admission programs? Amina asked as we left the award ceremony, using the word mom so naturally that I barely noticed the transition anymore. And Mrs. Rodriguez says the robotics team might qualify for state competition if we can improve our robot's navigation system. Yassine added with excitement that revealed how much he'd embraced both academic challenges and social activities at his new school. The casual way they'd begun calling me Mom had evolved gradually over months of shared experiences, helping with homework, discussing college plans, navigating teenage social dynamics, and creating the kind of daily family routines that had been missing from my life since James's death. "I'm proud of both of you," I said as we drove home. "Your dedication to your studies and your kindness to classmates has made this year remarkable for all of us." "Mom, can we talk about something important tonight?" Yasin asked, his tone suggesting serious rather than casual conversation. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "Amina and I have been discussing our plans for after high school, and we want your advice about some decisions we need to make." That evening, after dinner, both children presented me with carefully researched information about university applications, scholarship opportunities, and career planning that revealed months of serious consideration about their futures. "Mom, I've been accepted to the early admission program at MIT for engineering," Yasin announced with pride, mixed with nervousness about how I might react to his ambitious plans. "And I've been accepted to the pre-med program at Johns Hopkins," Amina added. Both schools offer significant financial aid, so we could attend without using all of Papa's education fund. I felt overwhelmed with pride listening to them describe opportunities that represented the realization of dreams their biological parents had encouraged and that I'd spent the past year supporting through daily guidance and encouragement. "These are incredible achievements. Your father would be so proud of what you've accomplished. But Mom, there's something else we want to discuss," Yasin said carefully. "Something about our family and our future." "What do you mean?" Amina and Yasin exchanged glances, apparently having rehearsed this conversation extensively before bringing it to me. "Mom, we know that your guardianship of us was originally meant to be temporary, just until we could get established in American schools and apply to universities," Yasin explained. "But over this past year, you've become our real mother in every way that matters," Amina continued. "You've supported our dreams, helped us navigate American culture, and loved us through all the adjustments we've had to make. We want to know if you would be willing to make our family relationship permanent," Yasin said. "Not just as guardianship, but as adoption." "Adoption?" I hadn't considered the possibility that they might want to formalize our relationship beyond the legal guardianship that would end when they reached adulthood. "We want you to be our mother officially," Amina said. "We want to carry your name and have you be listed as our parent on all our university applications and future documents. We want people to know that Catherine Morrison isn't just our guardian, she's our mom," Yasin added. I felt tears forming as I realized that these children were asking me to claim them permanently, to make our family relationship legal and lasting rather than temporary and circumstantial. "Are you sure about this? Adoption would mean permanently changing your names and your legal identity. Mom, you've given us everything we need to succeed: love, support, guidance, and opportunity," Amina said. "We want to honor that by becoming officially your children. And we want any future grandchildren to know their grandmother, Catherine Morrison, not just the woman who helped their parents get through high school," Yasin added with a smile. The mention of future grandchildren, the possibility that these children might someday give me the extended family I'd never imagined possible, filled me with joy that felt like redemption for decades of unfulfilled maternal longing. "I would be honored to adopt you," I said, embracing them both. "You've made my life more meaningful and purposeful than I ever thought possible." "Mom, there's one more thing we want to tell you," Amina said. "We've written a letter to Papa that we want to share with you." They handed me a handwritten letter they'd composed together. "Dear Papa, 1 year ago, you left us with Mom Catherine, hoping she might become our guardian and help us pursue our dreams in America. We want you to know that she has become so much more than a guardian. She has become our true mother. Mom has loved us, guided us, and supported us through every challenge we've faced in adapting to American life. She has attended every school event, helped with every homework assignment, and celebrated every achievement as if we were the children she'd been hoping for her entire life. Papa, we understand now why you loved both Mom Catherine and Mama Fatima. They are both extraordinary women who taught us that love isn't limited by biology or complicated by circumstances. Mom Catherine has shown us that families can be created through choice and commitment as well as through birth. We are proud to be your children, and we are proud to become Mom Catherine's children officially through adoption. We think you would be happy to know that the family you always hoped we could become has finally been created. With love and gratitude, your children, Yasin and Amina." I read their letter through tears, understanding that they'd found a way to honor both sets of parents while embracing the family we'd built together over the past year. "We're going to place this letter with Papa's photograph in our rooms," Yasin explained, "so he knows that his plan worked and that we're all happy." 6 months later, I stood in a Connecticut courthouse watching a judge finalize the adoption papers that made Yasin and Amina Morrison officially my children. At 69, I was finally experiencing the moment I'd dreamed about for decades, claiming children as my own, accepting the responsibilities and joys of motherhood, and building a family based on love rather than biology. "Congratulations, Mrs. Morrison," the judge said. "You now have 2 remarkable children who clearly adore their mother." As we left the courthouse, Yasin and Amina each carrying copies of their new birth certificates listing Catherine Morrison as their mother, I realized that James's betrayal had ultimately led to the greatest gift of my life. "Mom, we have something for you," Amina said, presenting me with a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph of the 3 of us from their high school graduation, with an inscription that read, "To the best mother we could have asked for. Thank you for choosing to love us. Love, Yasin and Amina Morrison." Some families, I had learned, were created not through conventional circumstances, but through courage, commitment, and the understanding that love could transform even the most painful betrayals into unexpected blessings. At 69, I was no longer a childless woman grieving her husband's deception. I was a mother raising remarkable children toward futures that honored both their dreams and mine. 5 years after that courthouse adoption ceremony, I stood in the kitchen of our Connecticut home preparing a celebratory dinner for a milestone that would have seemed impossible when I first found James's letter hidden in our safe. Yasin had just graduated from MIT with his engineering degree, and Amina was completing her 2nd year of medical school at Johns Hopkins with honors that placed her at the top of her class. The house buzzed with excitement as both children, now young adults of 21 and 19, helped me prepare traditional Moroccan dishes alongside American favorites, creating the fusion cuisine that had become our family tradition over the years. "Mom, Dr. Patterson wants me to consider applying for the Hopkins Research Fellowship Program," Amina announced as she chopped vegetables for the salad. "It would mean an extra year of study, but I'd be working on pediatric cardiac surgery research, and the firm where I completed my internship offered me a full-time position designing sustainable infrastructure projects," Yasin added proudly. "They said my senior thesis on earthquake-resistant building techniques caught their attention." I felt the familiar surge of maternal pride watching these remarkable young people discuss opportunities that represented the fulfillment of dreams their biological parents had encouraged and that I'd spent 5 years nurturing through daily guidance and unconditional love. "Both opportunities sound incredible," I said. "Your father would be so proud of what you've accomplished." "All 3 of our parents would be proud," Amina corrected gently, acknowledging Fatima, James, and me as the combined influences that had shaped their paths to success. Over the years, we developed comfortable ways of talking about James and Fatima that honored their contributions to Yasin and Amina's lives, while recognizing the family we'd built together. Their biological parents were remembered with love and gratitude, but I'd become their primary source of guidance, support, and maternal affection. The doorbell rang, interrupting our dinner preparations with the arrival of unexpected guests. I opened the door to find my neighbor Mrs. Patterson with her granddaughter Sarah, who attended the same high school Yasin and Amina had graduated from. "Catherine, I hope we're not intruding, but Sarah has something she wants to ask Yasin and Amina about college planning." "Of course, come in. We were just finishing dinner preparations." Sarah, a quiet sophomore with obvious academic ambition, approached my children with the nervous respect that younger students often showed to successful college graduates. "Yasin, Amina, my guidance counselor said you both achieved incredible things in high school and got into amazing universities. Could you give me advice about preparing for college applications?" I watched with pride as my children spent the next hour patiently explaining study strategies, extracurricular activities, and application techniques to a teenager who reminded me of themselves at that age, driven, intelligent, and seeking guidance from people who'd successfully navigated the path they wanted to follow. "The most important thing is to be genuine about your interests and passionate about your goals," Amina advised. "Admissions committees can tell the difference between students who are genuinely motivated and students who are just checking boxes. And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it," Yasin added. "Mom taught us that accepting guidance from people who care about your success isn't weakness, It's smart strategy. After Sarah and Mrs. Patterson left, I found myself reflecting on how naturally my children had embraced the role of mentors and guides for younger students. They'd internalized the values I'd tried to teach them about using their success to help others achieve similar opportunities. "Mom, we want to talk to you about something important," Yasin said as we cleaned up the kitchen together. "What's on your mind?" "Amina and I have been discussing our futures, and we've made some decisions that we hope will make you happy," Amina said, with the mysterious tone that suggested they'd been planning something significant. "What kind of decisions?" "We've decided to stay in Connecticut for the next phase of our careers," Yasin announced. "I accepted the position with the local engineering firm, and Amina is transferring to Yale Medical School to complete her studies." "You're both staying close to home?" I felt surprised and touched that they'd chosen to remain nearby rather than pursuing opportunities that might take them across the country or around the world. "Mom, you've sacrificed 5 years of your retirement to raise us and help us achieve our dreams," Amina explained. "We want to be close enough to take care of you as you get older, the way you took care of us when we needed family. And we want any future children we have to grow up knowing their grandmother Catherine," Yasin added. "We want them to understand that families can be created through love and choice, not just through biology." The mention of future grandchildren, a possibility that had seemed impossible during my childless marriage but now represented hope for extended family, filled me with joy that felt like completion of a journey I'd never expected to take. "I'm honored that you want to stay close to home, but I also want you to pursue the opportunities that will make you happiest, even if they take you far away. Mom, the opportunities that will make us happiest are the ones that allow us to maintain our family relationships while building our careers," Amina said. "We learned from Papa's choices that trying to compartmentalize family and professional life creates complications and pain for everyone involved. We want to build integrated lives where our family relationships support our professional goals rather than competing with them," Yasin added. That evening, as we shared our celebratory dinner, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought us from James's devastating confession to this moment of family unity and shared achievement. "I want to tell you both something important," I said as we finished dessert. 6 years ago, when I found your father's letter, I thought his betrayal had destroyed my understanding of love and family. I never imagined that his secret would lead to the greatest blessing of my life." "What do you mean?" Amina asked. "I mean that becoming your mother has taught me that love isn't limited by biology. Betrayal can be transformed into opportunity, and some families are created through courage rather than conception. Mom, we want you to know that you saved our lives," Yasin said seriously. "Not just by bringing us to America for education, but by loving us when we were strangers, guiding us when we were lost, and believing in us when we doubted ourselves. You gave us something that no amount of money or educational opportunity could provide," Amina added. "You gave us a mother who loves us unconditionally and a family that will support us forever." As I looked across the table at my remarkable children, now successful young adults who'd chosen to build their futures close to the woman who'd raised them, I realized that James's letter had been both confession and prophecy. My husband hid 2 children from me for 15 years, children he could have with another woman when I couldn't conceive. But he left me the greatest opportunity of my life, to finally become a mother at 68, to 2 extraordinary teenagers who needed me as much as I needed them. Some betrayals become blessings when they're transformed by love, courage, and the understanding that families can be created through choice rather than chance. At 74, I was no longer a betrayed wife, or a grieving widow, or even just an adoptive mother. I was Catherine Morrison, beloved mother to Yasin and Amina, mentor to young people seeking guidance, and living proof that some of life's greatest gifts arrive disguised as its most devastating losses. James's secret had destroyed the marriage I thought I'd known, but it had created the family I'd always dreamed of having. Some discoveries I had learned were worth all the pain that preceded them. The end.